Once upon a time, in a quiet little village nestled on the edge of a sleepy town, there lived a young boy named Ryan. He shared a modest home with his parents, and from the outside, his life looked simple and peaceful. But there was one thing that made Ryan stand out in the eyes of everyone in the village. He was famously lazy. Now, when folks say lazy, they don't always mean useless. Ryan wasn't a troublemaker, nor was he unkind. He just didn't like doing more than he had to. While other boys ran and played, Ryan would lie in the shade, daydreaming. He didn't like hard work, and he certainly didn't see the point in tiring himself out if he could find an easier way. But here's the twist. Ryan may have been lazy, but he was also clever, surprisingly clever. His father was a hard-working farmer, the kind of man who rose with the sun and worked with his hands all day. He often worried about Ryan. What if I'm not around one day? He'd think to himself. Will my boy know how to take care of this land and this family? Every day, Ryan was given a small job to keep the birds away from the rice fields. Most boys would use sticks or run around shouting. But Ryan, he built a system of ropes and wooden poles so he could chase birds off without ever leaving his spot. Smart? Yes. Lazy? Absolutely. This story is not just about a lazy boy. It's about what happens when life demands more from us, when circumstances call us to grow up, step up, and prove ourselves. Ryan didn't know it yet, but a moment was coming that would test him in ways he never imagined, and perhaps, just perhaps, awaken something great within him. Ryan lived with his parents in a small, time-worn house at the edge of the village, the kind of place where the air smelled of earth and seasons, and neighbors still waved at each other from across the field. Life was simple, and for the most part, quiet. Every morning, Ryan would rise, not with the sun like his father, but eventually, and join him in the rice fields. His father, a man of few words and many calluses, spent his days tending to the land with unwavering dedication. He had learned the rhythms of the soil the way most men learn to read, slowly, thoroughly, with deep respect. Ryan, on the other hand, had only one job, to keep the birds away from the rice crop. For most boys, that would have meant long hours under the sun, running and shouting, waving sticks or slingshots to scare off flocks of hungry birds. But Ryan had other ideas. He looked at the wide open field, the birds, the sun beating down, and thought to himself, there must be an easier way. And so, instead of chasing the birds himself, Ryan set up wooden poles in various parts of the field and tied ropes between them. He pulled the ropes from a single spot, usually while lying down in the shade, sending the ropes jerking across the field to scare the birds. It worked. Amazingly, it worked. His father watched this with quiet concern. There was no denying Ryan had finished his job. The rice stayed safe. But the old man couldn't help but wonder what would happen if someday he fell ill. Would this boy, clever as he was, be ready to take on the real weight of the world? Still, he said nothing. Sometimes a father watches and waits, hoping time will do what words cannot. To the villagers, Ryan was the lazy boy who always found the shortcut. But to those paying closer attention, he was something more. A boy whose mind was always turning, always searching for a way to do things differently. Whether that would be enough, well, that part of the story was still waiting to be told. Then one summer, the rains never came. The fields cracked beneath the sun, and the air grew heavy with dust and silence. Ryan's father, worn thin by years of toil, fell gravely ill. For the first time, the boy who had always found a clever shortcut now faced a task he couldn't outsmart. With his father bedridden, the responsibility of the land fell squarely on Ryan's shoulders. He tried. He truly did. Day after day, he stepped into the heat, unsure and unprepared. But years of taking the easy path had left him weak and unfamiliar with hard work. The fields, thirsty and neglected, began to wither. One evening, Ryan sat alone under the stars. The night air was still, the crops quiet and dying behind him. He looked up at the sky and felt something he hadn't felt before. Shame. For the first time, he understood what it meant to let someone down. Why didn't I try harder before? He wondered. Now, it might be too late. That moment changed him. The next morning, just as the village was waking up and the mist was lifting off the fields, news arrived that would change everything. A royal soldier stood in the town square, reading from a scroll with great importance. The king was hosting a grand competition at the palace. The prize? A chest of gold, enough to change a family's life forever. Anyone from the kingdom could enter. Ryan, still tired from a night of restless thoughts, stood among the curious crowd. His clothes were dusty, and his spirit even more worn. But as he listened, something stirred inside him. A glimmer of hope, or maybe desperation. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and declared, "I'll join." The villagers gasped, then chuckled. "Ryan? The lazy boy?" they whispered. "He won't last a day." They didn't mean to be cruel. It was just hard to imagine someone known for avoiding effort suddenly rising to meet such a challenge. Back home, Ryan's parents were surprised, but not angry. In fact, deep down, they were quietly hopeful. Maybe this was the very thing their son needed. Not just a chance at gold, but a reason to try. A reason to fight. A reason to grow. For the first time, Ryan was choosing the hard road, and that in itself was the beginning of something new. 3 days later, Ryan arrived at the palace, tired but determined. The royal grounds buzzed with excitement as dozens of strong, confident competitors gathered, each one sizing up the others. Ryan, in his simple clothes and quiet demeanor, looked out of place, a boy among warriors. The first challenge was announced. Each contestant had to cross a wide lake. The first 3 to reach the other side would move on to the next round. As the signal was given, the crowd shouted, "Go!" and everyone dove straight into the water, arms thrashing, feet kicking. Ryan, however, stood still at the shore, watching them disappear into the distance. He knew he couldn't beat them at swimming, not with his thin arms and tired body. But then he looked around and smiled. Without a word, he turned and ran into the nearby woods. There, he gathered fallen branches, tied them together with strips of bark, and fashioned a small raft. Using a flat piece of wood as a paddle, he slowly began making his way across the lake. While others grew tired, fighting the current, Ryan's raft glided steadily forward. It wasn't fast, but it didn't have to be. In the end, to everyone's surprise, Ryan reached the far shore in 3rd place. He had done it, not with strength, but with thought. And that was enough to earn him a place in the next round. The next morning, the final round of the competition began. The remaining contestants, just 3 now, stood before the king's officials in a wide, dusty field. Each man was led to a massive wooden block, solid and heavy, nearly impossible to move by hand. The task was simple in words, but brutal in effort. Push your block 1 kilometer to the finish line. The first to arrive would win. Beside each block lay a small selection of tools. But there was a catch. Each person could choose only one. The first contestant, strong and confident, grabbed a thick rope. He looped it around the block and began pulling with every ounce of muscle. The second, more strategic, took a long piece of wood to use as a lever. Slowly, he pried his block forward, inch by inch. Then came Ryan. He didn't rush. He knelt beside the tools, thinking quietly while the crowd whispered. Finally, to everyone's surprise and some laughter, he picked up the smallest tool of all, a simple knife. A knife? Someone scoffed. What's he going to do, carve his way out of this? But that's exactly what Ryan did. Instead of trying to push the block, he began carving it. Carefully, patiently, he shaped it into something new, a round, smooth ball. It took time, but when he was finished, Ryan didn't have to push or drag. He simply rolled the wooden ball forward. And as the others strained, sweating and stumbling, Ryan passed them quietly, steadily, like a boy who had finally found his stride. He crossed the finish line first. The crowd cheered, not just for the win, but for the wonder of it all. The lazy boy, the daydreamer, had outsmarted them all. And so, the boy once known for his laziness stood before the king. Not as a joke, not as a surprise, but as a champion. Ryan hadn't won because he was the strongest. He hadn't even won because he was the fastest. He had won because he learned to think, to adapt, and most of all, because he had finally found a reason to try. A reason that came not from pride or greed, but from something far deeper, love. His family needed him. And for the first time in his life, that was enough. This story reminds us of something simple but true. Sometimes, people we underestimate carry quiet strengths, waiting to be awakened. Even a lazy boy can rise to greatness if the reason is strong enough. So if you ever feel stuck, tired, or unmotivated, don't just ask how to work harder. Ask why it matters. Because when the why is big enough, the how tends to follow.